right, hello and welcome to another Expert Insight interview. My name is John Golden from Sales Pop, online sales magazine and Pipeliner CRM, joining you as usual from a sunny San Diego. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Dave Garrison, who is just over the state border in Arizona, just north of Tucson. How are you doing, Dave?
John, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Dave is a leadership strategist with more than 25 years experience as a CEO, strategic advisor, and independent board member. You co-founded Garrison Growth in 2013 to help organizations ranging from new startups to major public corporations get the best results for their teams. And you have been a Young Presidents Organization member since 1993, and you have served as the chair of the leadership, or you currently serve as the chair of the YPO's Leadership Development Network, which has qualified over 30,000 CEOs as members. That's incredible. You've been on CNN, CNBC, Wall Street Journal. You have an MBA from Harvard Business School, and you are trained in entrepreneurial operating system, neurolinguistic programming, and DISC. And in your spare time. Yeah. Well, listen, and what we're going to talk about today is the $1 billion problem of employee disengagement and how to solve it. So I guess, Dave, let's just to bottom line the conversation. What do you mean by employee disengagement?
Yeah, John, great question. So Gallup organization does surveys year after year and says basically, would you recommend this as a place to work? And that's sort of the gold standard question. Would you lead a friend to this place? And the answer year after year is that on a net basis, about a third of the people would, meaning stay away, or I'm indifferent, or I'm just doing this for a while till I do something else is the norm. And that's a waste of human potential. It also is a profit waste, and it's a sales waste. Because if your salespeople aren't turned on, if they're not totally in it, and here's the analogy. Does your salesperson bring the same enthusiasm to the client and the office environment that they bring to Friday night football games in the US? Right?
Yeah.
There you see full engagement. Is that what we have at the office, or we have, okay, boss, tell me what you want me to do. I'll do it. I'll work as hard as I can. Yep, I'll fill out the reports. Got it.
Yeah, no, I agree, Dave, absolutely. And I think the answer to that would, most people, if they were going to be honest, would be absolutely no. I mean, you see the same thing in where you see people will invest time, money, and energy into their hobbies, but they won't invest the same time, money, and energy into their own professional development, right? And the jobs and the companies they work for.
Yeah, and you know what's changed is we're right now in a perfect storm that was created in part by the pandemic,
Mhm.
where people were allowed to reflect on what's really important to them, and what they expect from work has changed. And there's a new generation, Gen Z, is taking center stage, and it's not just about money. And yet, all of our leadership methods, and what I see leaders ask all the time is, what are the numbers? How are we doing on the metrics? Let's report on last month's, sales numbers. And that's not getting us there. We're missing tools.
Yeah, and I think also, I think you're right about the pandemic and that period of reflection, and also to some degree, because of remote work, etc., and people have become very autonomous, and that in itself, that's a double-edged sword in itself.
Absolutely. So one of the concepts that we put forward in the book, The Buy-in Advantage, is done with, not done to. And there's an opportunity to co-create, both as a sales leader and as a sales professional. And co-create looks like, for example, if you're doing a review of a salesperson, how about, since they should have all the same information you have, how about if they do the review and you chip in on anything they're missing? And then ask them, okay, what could we do differently? What could you do differently in order to change results going forward? Which is, when I was a salesperson, it's a hard grind. And what I heard was the sales manager told me basically, do it like I do it. Here's how to do it. And that was not helpful because I'm not them. So that doesn't work.
Yeah, and on top of that, Dave, even often the best and the highest performing salespeople, and maybe they were made into a sales manager, and when they say, "Do what I do," and you say, "Well, what do you do?" and they're like, "I don't know," because they actually don't know. They're actually unconsciously highly competent, but they don't know how to tell somebody else. And as you said, it may not suit you. Um, and I agree with you. I think one of my pet peeves always has been, these performance reviews, right? And what do
Right.
we do with performance reviews? We do is, oh, Dave, yeah, two things that you've done well this year. Now here's 152 things that you did badly that I want you to work on. And we obsess on people's perceived weaknesses instead of focusing on their strengths.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, it is so I've done hundreds of these reviews, as I'm sure
Mhm.
you have, and it's not anything I ever look forward to until I flipped my attitude to say, do you know what? This is my opportunity to learn about the other person, to
Mhm.
learn about their experience. And if you can co-create and before the review, put the questions forward. What do you think you're doing well? What do you think could be improved upon? People are smart. They know exactly what's going
Mhm.
on. If you have set them up so you have common expectations and common measures, they're perfectly capable, if you've hired the right people, of doing their own review. You should
Yeah.
be just putting the icing on the cake.
Yeah, and I think you should be also open to somebody saying, "Listen, hey Dave, this is something that I struggle with, and to be honest, I don't think I'm ever going to be any good at it. So, can we figure out a way that I can either not do this, or somebody else can do it, or we can find a way that I can, focus on things that I'm better at? Because let's face it, you go back to the enthusiasm for your job. You tend to be enthusiastic about things you're good at and things you like doing.
Absolutely. And that's what you should be tasked with doing. And the stuff you don't like, I mean, there's some stuff always, there's reporting,
Sure.
which are the salespeople. But if it's something you really don't enjoy doing, figure out somebody for whom that is an amazing thing to do.
Yeah.
And that's an example of done with, not done to. And one of the concepts. Another thing is, there's a myth that I hear all the time in sales that, you know what, it's just all about money. It's just all about money. Money is the motivator, et cetera, et cetera. And from salespeople, I hear all that matters is price. All that matters is price. So let me give you an example of where that's actually, money is important, price is important, no doubt about that. But two examples. One is from the employer's perspective. A man named Brandon, who'd been through one of our sessions, his son in law approached him, young manager, said, "Hey, I've got a salesperson who keeps insisting on more money, and I can't give him more money because that would be unfair to the other
Mhm.
people. What do I do?" Brandon said, "Do you know what he would do with the money?" And the son in law said, "No, no idea." And he said, "Ask him what the money is for. What's the money about?" And this young salesperson said, "You know what the money's about? My girlfriend really likes to go to the movies and it's expensive. And we want to go to the movies every single weekend and I can't afford it. So I need more money." So the son in law said, "Okay, well, what about if we gave you movie tickets and just bypassed the whole money thing?" And the kid was delighted. And so
Mhm.
you don't know what it is people are buying until you really ask. And on the client side, I'll give you an example. We trained a sales team in a Phoenix car dealership, and we said, this is going to seem silly, but bear with us. Ask great questions. So another thing from the Buying Advantage book is ask questions, don't
Mhm.
tell. The questions is simply, what is it that this car, what is it that this new vehicle, this used vehicle, what is it that this vehicle would do for you?
Mhm.
And they said, "That's the stupidest question in the world. It's to save gas mileage. It's to blah, blah, blah." I said, "No, ask the customer. Don't talk
Mhm.
about your product." And the next time we came back, we said, "How'd it go?" And they said, "Do you know what somebody told me? It allows me to save my house." And I said, "What?" And they
Mm.
said, "I have to commute into Phoenix and I need a reliable transportation so I can keep my house, which is in a much lower cost of living." So what
Right.
the person was buying was keeping their house. The car was just a vehicle to get there. So the
Yeah.
question is, what would this product, what would this service do for you or allow you to have or be? Becomes a really important question for both sales managers and salespeople with their clients, if that makes sense.
No, that makes complete sense. Because let's face it, Dave. Whatever product or service or whatever you're selling or bringing to the market, it doesn't matter how much time or energy you put into developing it or putting it together. At the end of the day, the minute it gets into the hands of a customer, they'll use it in ways that you didn't anticipate. And let's just like you said, and they'll buy it for reasons you didn't anticipate. So if you don't ask that question, you'll never know. There you go. You're in the car example. The person was buying, peace of mind and a certain amount of stability. They want security, right? They weren't buying a car, they were buying security and stability.
Yeah, there's another example, industrial sales. So people go, well, that's great B2C, but tell me about B2B.
Mhm.
A sales force that had had flat results for basically 10 years in Ohio. We said, tell you what, they said, our customer just cares about price. It's all that matters. We said, it's all that matters. Yep, we respond to the RFP. They select the lowest price.
Right.
We said, okay, humor us. Go ask them this question, not about you. Ask, what are the characteristics of the best companies you work with? The best suppliers, what are the characteristics? And the buyer thought about it and they came back and said, you know what? It's about reliability, it's
Yeah.
about responsiveness, and it's about keeping your word. And I said, oh, they didn't mention price first. And the sales force was blown away, but it gave them a new opportunity to have conversation about what was important to the customer that they never knew about because they were trained to say, oh, it's the price and our price has to be lowest. Not
Yeah.
always the case.
Yeah, and I think that's what sometimes in B2C or B2B rather selling, I think sometimes people overlook the fact that yes, you're selling to a company and maybe you're selling to somebody who's representing that company, maybe a buying committee or whatever, but they're still human beings and they still have something invested in it because as I always say, a B2C purchase, right? If I go out and buy a fancy new flat screen TV, probably the worst thing that's going to happen to me is my wife's going to hit me over the head with it and say, you could have spent the money better, right? But in a B2B situation, it can be career enhancing or career limiting depending on the purchasing decision I make. Therefore, we shouldn't overlook that there's this human elements involved here.
Right. And so it is all about their reputation and their career, and they don't want to look bad. So, a question that is pretty informative is, what's the best buying experience you've ever had?
Mhm.
And they're going to tell you. Other questions are important about them, not about you. Before you ever get to your product, it's questions like, hey, just to help me understand, what are the most important business objectives for you in 2025? And allow them to describe their world to you. So that's the asking questions instead of telling them.
Mhm.
Otherwise, we train our salespeople to go say, go ask them about their budget for blank, or
Mhm.
ask them about, did they realize what a great product, or other things that are not relevant. What's relevant is their world. And
Yeah.
so true it is with our salespeople and what's important for them.
No, and absolutely. And I think, I mean, how many experiences have you had where somebody call, like a salesperson will call you or engage with you, and from the get go, you can tell that there's no passion for this. There's no real belief in it. They either feel kind of little disinterested, or worse, they just come across as anxious and kind of desperate, and those are the things. And at the end of the day, you want the salesperson to love their product, to feel great about their company, to be one, to be able to say, we're the most reliable, we're going to be the most responsive, we're the most trustworthy, and you have to believe it because you hear it in their voice.
Absolutely. But I also want them to say, you know what, before I say anything about who we are, what we do, I'd really like to know what your world is like. And I'll
Yeah.
give you an example. So, one of our clients was acquired by Amazon, and they really wanted to get on the Amazon Prime platform because it's a big distribution
Yeah.
platform. Believe it or not, just because you're owned by Amazon has nothing to do with whether or not you're on the platform. And they said to us, the decision makers are people we're never going to meet because of pandemic. How do we convince them? Everybody's asking to be on the platform.
Yeah.
How do we get to the top of the list? And we said, you know what? It's the same lesson from the book. It's deal with human beings, not human doings. Human beings, not human doings. human doings make a decision about who's in the platform. Human beings are people that are celebrating things. So, how about if you start out your Zoom call and say, hey, before we get started, really curious to know, what are you celebrating? And just connect with a human being. And human beings will somehow prioritize a list that puts you closer to the top because they remember, hey, John
Mhm.
was the guy I have good feelings about. And that's a
Yeah.
human being connection, not a, our product is really great and ought to be on the Amazon Prime platform because of these three reasons, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, yeah, and you're right, and I think I mean, this was always important, obviously, but I think it's become even more important because we went through the pandemic, because we went through a period of where, quite frankly, a lot of companies were using technology not as an enabler of greater relationships, but as a barrier, if you like, as a way of keeping people at an arm's length. And I think today people want that. They want to know that it doesn't matter how technologically advanced your company is and all the things it can do for you. They want to know at the end of the day, there's people behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things in the Buy an Advantage book are the 8 common warning signs that you've got an engagement problem. And some are
Mhm.
really obvious, like turnover or meetings start late or meetings run over. And there's a checklist there you can go through. But one of the things that we found to be really important is alignment on purpose,
Mhm.
because people want to do something that matters since they're spending most of their time doing it. Research from McKinsey says that 8 in 10 people say the purpose of the company is important. Why does it matter? Why should I bother doing it? And so there's an opportunity for us in the interview process to ask the question or to share what our purpose is, and then ask the question, how do you see yourself in that purpose? How does that
Mhm.
relate to you? And find out about purpose alignment, which is different than, do you have the skills to sell? Because if you have
Mhm.
the skills to sell and you leave me in a year, you haven't done me any good. You just created more work,
Yeah,
right?
and I think that's also a really important concept about purpose, the company purpose, and your own purpose. And I think that's people struggle a lot when they're, if you ask them the question, well, what is your purpose? They struggle with that because they think, well, I have to have some grand, altruistic thing. But it maybe at the end of the day is I like solving problems. I like helping people. I like helping people be successful. I like to be creative, and I think what a great, for salespeople, what a great purpose to have in life is to help people solve problems, to help people be more successful. I mean, that's a fantastic purpose.
Isn't that what sales is? I mean, we
Yeah,
have people who shy away who are not in sales going, oh, I couldn't be a salesperson. It's like sales is serving others' needs. Do you have the
yeah.
ability to listen deeply to someone, to understand their pain points, and then think of creative ways, whether it's you, your product, or some other product you can refer them to? How do
Yeah.
you address their pain? It's not all that difficult, but it's not always practiced. The other thing about interview questions is to tap into the company values. So
Mhm.
if you're a healthy organization, you probably have 3 or 4 values that are really important. For example, if it's integrity in the interview process, ask a question that's behavior based, not, oh, do you have integrity? That's one of our values. It's, hey, have you ever been put in a position at work where you've been asked to do something you didn't believe was right? Can
Mhm.
you tell me what happened and how you responded? So you get to understand exactly how the person relates to whatever values are important to you.
Yeah, and I think, and vice versa, from from the person who's been interviewed, it should be important for you to understand, because I can say, well, hey Dave, here's our values and our principles. I mean, for all you know, they can be bumper stickers that are just on the
Yeah,
website
yeah,
that make us feel good. It doesn't mean we actually act them out. So I think from
yes.
the other point of view as well, it's good to say, well, I really like the purpose. I really like the values you have. Can you give me a greater insight into how those are lived out in the organization?
Beautiful question. That's absolutely the acid test. And if they go, it tells you they're not. And what I'm looking for, if I was interviewing, I'm looking for, yes,
Mhm.
we recognize, we promote, we reward based on purpose, values, and accomplishment. Because if it's just about accomplishment and not about the others, then it tells you that this is sort of a soulless organization. And if you want to do it for a quick spin and make a buck, great. But making a buck is awesome. I like money more than anybody. But if it doesn't have more to it, it feels really hollow. I want something that I can sink my teeth into, that I really deeply care about. That's what creates the Friday night football feeling that we are really lacking now.
And let's face it, we've all seen or been in organizations, or maybe it's even, we've been responsible for, we've seen that the person who delivers great results, right? Say that salesperson who delivers great results, but they're an absolute nightmare otherwise. They cause mayhem. They go out, they always do this and that, and they impact other people, and it gets tolerated because of the results. So therefore you can't say it's achievement plus this plus that, when clearly it's not. So that's where you have to, and those are different. And those can be really difficult decisions, because you got to either say, I'm willing to tolerate this and I don't care, or I need to live this and I'm going to run the risk of losing that person and losing that revenue.
Absolutely. And if I was if I was being interviewed for a position, one of the questions I would ask is, tell me about the last person you let go. What was the cause? What was the process? What was the cause? I don't want to know their name or anything else, but what was that about?
Sure.
Because that will tell you where values are as well. And that's where the real world exists, as opposed to bumper sticker land, as you say.
Yeah. So what's one last piece of advice, Dave, you would give from your book?
Oh boy, it is to co-create. Co-create. If you have a sales target that it blows your mind, ask the people around you, ask your team, what are different ways that we could achieve this? If you have a client that you're working with, ask them, what would an ideal solution look like? What would this solution do for you? So co-create. It's doing with, not doing to. And that is something I wish I knew when I was carrying the bag in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, and I just think one last thing, just to get your input on, I think also is we have to organization, philosophy, and that is changing, and we have to get away from this hierarchical mentality and more of as you said, the co-creating, the work, the teaming, the working alongside, like the sales leaders supporting and working alongside the salespeople, not just saying, hey, I'm checking your numbers right now. It's like, how do we work together to get you to that result?
And to that point, John, an important question for sales leaders: what can I do for you? How can I support you? How can I make you more successful? And that requires knowing what's important to the salesperson. Why are they doing it? What does money do for them? And that will give you the key to motivation and recognition. And that's the key that unlocks the golden gate.
Yeah, and it's rarely, I want you to come in at the last moment, elbow me out of the way, and close the deal on my behalf.
True that.
Well, listen, Dave, this has been great. All of Dave's information will be below this video, including links to books and your other contact information. But before we go, please do share with people a little bit more about you and Garrison.
Yeah, so John, I started my sales career selling air in Dallas, Texas. And that means I sold advertising. And you talk about the intangible sale. We have to capture imagination, ask questions. That's it. Progressed through management, moved over to the internet business, built out some global internet companies, and realized the thing that I really get satisfaction from is seeing people accomplish things they didn't think were possible. So we founded Garrison Growth to work with individual leaders and with teams on accomplishing things they didn't think were possible, with specific tools that are proven, that work, that we learned from others. I wish I had this book when I was a CEO.
Yeah, what a great, fantastic, Dave, and what a great mission. I mean, helping people to achieve things they didn't think was possible. It's got to give you some fantastic satisfaction, as well as obviously the great seeing people succeed. So listen, thanks again, Dave. Thank you for watching and listening, and I will see you all again very soon. Thank you.